still
easy
makes playoffs.
Easy with that kind of talk.
I think Cleveland makes playoffs with the wild card, though. I don't see them getting out of there unless the Angels maybe make a run for it in the West. But yeah, I see Minnesota and Cleveland making playoffs.
Minnesota and Cleveland. Okay.
Wow. So that's interesting because I think that, I don't think that there's more than one team that escapes the Central this year for the playoffs because, you're looking at it, I think, like we were talking about, you're looking at Boston and New York. We'll get to the AL West in a second, but I think that's interesting that you think that Cleveland and Minnesota can make it. So I hope so.
Yeah,
for my sake, I hope so. Because
with ththose other teams being so bad, you got to figure each one of those teams are going to get a lot of wins this year. So, I don't know about Kansas City though. They made a few moves that they like to do. They're a huge defensive team. They like to cover a lot of ground in the outfield. They got Billy Hamilton, so that'll bring back like a Lorenzo Cain type defense for them. You never know what that team's going to do because they're almost like the A's, where one year they're real bad, the next year they could just be number one in the division, just get really hot. But I still see Cleveland and Minnesota making playoffs, both those teams.
Okay. All right, so just for the record, Ed, you got Cleveland winning the division. And then, Matt, you have Minnesota winning the division, but Cleveland has a wild card.
Correct.
Okay, got it. And then last but not least, we have the AL West. And if you guys, you guys are in the room when you can see what team I represent in the AL West. My Los Angeles Angels. All right, real quick, before we dive into all the other teams, what is up with my Angels, man? Like, how come we got the best player in baseball? We had the best player in baseball for the longest time. We spend a lot of money on these big free agents like Pujols, and I remember we signed Josh Hamilton or whatever his name was.
Yeah,
what the fuck is going on with my Angels, man? How do we fix the problem? Was it the fucking manager? He's gone now. Is it solved?
As Ed said before, as you go on and you sign these players into these late years for them in their career, like Pujols. He's not hitting 40 home runs every year anymore. He's closer to 25 now. He can be a little bit consistent at times, but that's not the Pujols of old. So they got an old Pujols at first base. Hamilton, that man's gone. Once they start putting money into these guys and they're paying them until they're gone, it's going to be trouble for them. So maybe they can do something this year, but it's... Lucroy is their big signing. And honestly, I see that guy as a winner. Ed hates him because of the Indians, and what he did to them. But I think Lucroy is a winner, and he might actually make that Angels team get to playoffs. So if there's any chance of them making playoffs, this is the year. Even with Ohtani out at pitcher for most, if not the whole year. Let's see how he does hitting, but this would be the year, if anything.
Yeah, I really like what the Angels have done over the past few years. If you want to talk about what's kind of sunk them the last few years, I think it's been the health of their starting pitching. You've had a lot of really good pitchers that have come through there that couldn't stay on the field. Anyone from Garrett Richards, Shoemaker, Jared Weaver, if we're going back that far.
Yeah.
Those are guys that, they could have had a really nice rotation put together, but you can't keep these guys on the field, and you're relying on guys that probably should be in AAA, and all of a sudden you've got some problems. But if we take a look over the last few years, what they've been building out there I think is really nice. You got to like Justin Upton signing, Zach Cozart, bringing in Andrelton Simmons from the Braves as a defensive shortstop, incredible. The signing of Ohtani, of course, is a big deal, who is a guy that makes the news because he can pitch and hit, right? Nobody does that. Right. But I think that they're moving in the right direction, and I think if it wasn't for Houston being in their division, that's a team we'd be talking about right there. But I have them moving up from fourth to second in the division this year. So
okay. All right, so the favorite obviously is Houston.
Definitely. There's no one competing with them.
Yeah, I remember before we started the show, Ed, you was looking over the roster, and you was just like, man, these guys are stacked.
Yeah, it's almost not fair across the board. And, you're looking at Yuli Gurriel, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Alex Bregman. That might be as good as it gets for an infield in the bigs. You're talking about George Springer and Josh Reddick in the outfield, and then an addition that breaks my heart. I don't know if I mentioned him earlier as one of the departures from the Indians, but Michael Brantley in left. That's an understated presence there. That's a great veteran leader, and that's somebody that can go out in a very kind of quiet way and hit 310, 320 for you.
And almost 30 home runs if he's healthy.
Yeah, I think I think his power days might be a little bit behind him, but a guy that's going to be on base for the rest of those guys to hit in, I think is.
But hitting in Houston.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, very true.
A little different than Cleveland there. Cleveland's a pretty big field. It's they got that short porch in left field, and Houston, he hits to all sides of the field, so those opposite field hits will definitely benefit him a little bit more.
Yeah, man. And then, looking at Houston the rest of the way, obviously with their starting pitching is really good. Even without Dallas Keuchel, hasn't re-signed yet. We don't know where he's going, but they look really tough, man. They're going to be a really good team again. And barring a bunch of unforeseen injuries, I think that Houston comes out on top, followed closely by the Angels. And in third in that division, I've got the Oakland Athletics. So your Matt might want to talk about them.
I'm surprised you have them at third. I have them moving all the way down to fourth, maybe even last.
Damn.
I'm so unfortunate, but
why so low?
I really think that the departure of Lucroy right there is a big part of their was a big part of their playoff run. But I mean, the last time they were about to be in playoff, or they were in playoffs, they had Stephen Vogt at the time, and he was having a really good season. I feel like their catcher is a big position for them, and if they don't have that, they're going to be out of luck. Let's put it that way. I have Seattle in third, Texas maybe even moving up one, but Oakland and Texas I feel like are going to be at the bottom there. I hope that Oakland does big things this year, but that's always a hope. I don't really expect too much out of them this year.
All right. So for the record, AL West winners, we have Houston.
Yep.
Houston for both of you guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then for the wild cards, I want to make sure we get these on record as well. So the wild card teams, Ed, who you got?
I've got the Boston Red Sox and the Los Angeles Angels making the playoffs this year. So
thank you.
Maybe see some playoff baseball from Mike Trout for a change.
I appreciate that.
And I have the Yankees and the Twins making the wild card.
No, you got the Twins winning the division. So
Yankees
you got Cleveland.
And Indians.
Okay.
Going to the wild card. My bad.
Okay. All right, and I didn't even give my picks yet, but you know what? I'm going to pick.
There we go.
So AL East, we're going to roll with Boston. AL Central, we're going to roll with Cleveland. The AL West, we're going to roll with Houston. And then my wild card team is going to be Yankees and Angels. And yeah, the Angels pick is definitely biased.
You got an AL Cy Young there?
We're gonna talk winners. We're gonna definitely talk winners of the awards. I want to get to the NL first before we go into that. So moving on into the NL. Let's start from the top. Let's start from the East. So who is the favorite you guys think to win the NL East this year? Matt, let's start with you.
No, I think this is a complete toss-up. Now, I mean, Atlanta, if they can hit the way they did last year, they're going to be one. But I see the Mets making a push. I know it's a little shocking. They've been at the bottom for a while. They got rid of Terry Collins. That guy was a joke. So they got a new manager now. I feel like their pitching staff is, if not the best in the league, it is. I mean, it's top three in the league. They got some of those pitchers there, almost unhittable. Syndergaard and DeGrom. If you have both those guys in your starting lineup, that's scary right there. So I have the Mets winning that division. I have Washington taking a little bit of a plummet, even though they were about 500 last year. Even though they have that young talent and they picked up Corbin, I still feel like their pitchers are going to win them. Probably 80% of the games that they do win. I don't really see their hitting going anywhere this year.
What you thinking, Ed?
I like a lot of things that Matt said there. I too have Washington taking a big step backwards. A lot of times when you lose a guy like Harper, that, for better or for worse, was the heart and soul of the team. Never quite got them to the promised land anyway. But I think that they take a step backwards as well. I love what he was talking about on the push on the Mets. They've got some great young players. One that I would highlight is Brandon Nimmo. I think you're going to hear big things from that kid. That's a guy that could, year in and year out, I think he could be a 300 hitter and score 100 runs for you. That's not a lot of people are talking about him, but I think that's a guy that could really produce for the Mets. But I still have Atlanta on top there. I love a lot of what Philly's trying to do there, and we can talk about them in a second. But just looking at the Braves, they look just terrific across the board. Ozzie Albies, Freddie Freeman, Markakis, Acuna. That's a really solid lineup. I think they're going to be tough to dethrone there. And even with the Phillies getting quite a lot of attention this offseason, and for good reason, I don't think they've got what it takes to overtake them this year. Yeah,
speaking of the Phillies, they made 2 huge signings. Obviously, the biggest one that just happened a couple of days ago, Bryce Harper, 13-year, $330 million deal, the highest free agent deal ever in MLB history. And then also another big one was the Andrew McCutchen signing. Mm-hmm. And didn't they have one more? I think they had made one more move, if I'm not mistaken. One more big move. Was it David Robertson?
They got David Robertson in the bullpen.
Okay.
I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there. They really secured their outfield where one of the guys that I always really liked watching play, Odubel Herrera. It's another guy you don't hear a lot about, but he patrols center field, and he's a pretty good hitter out there. I think you got Rhys Hoskins, who came into his own the past couple years. That's a guy that can probably hit 35, 40 home runs for you.
In a week. No.
yeah. If we're talking batting practice, he'll go out hitting 30 or 40 before the game starts. But
didn't he have that 1 month where he had 15 home runs last year?
Yeah, I think so, man. That's a guy. He just reminds me of a guy that's just country strong, that just hits the ball a mile when he gets a hold of it. It's a whole lineup that's filled with guys that can really hit bombs. Maikel Franco's that way. Bryce Harper, obviously, we know what he can do. The other big signing, too, that you didn't mention, Bryce, was JT Realmuto.
Yeah.
That's the catcher. That's one of the guys I was holding out hope that the Indians would sign.
Yeah.
But he's a really good player. And then, it all comes back to starting pitching usually. And Aaron Nola, that's a guy that really, really came into his own. Of course, Jake Arrieta, Nick Pivetta. The Phillies will be tough, but I don't know that they come together yet to overtake Atlanta. So that's kind of where I'm looking there.
So Atlanta's still the favorite for you.
Yeah, I mean, if they could get another pitcher in there and make Arrieta their number 2 or possibly even their number 3, that team's dangerous. But as of right now, with Arrieta being their ace and Nola being their complement until he really blows people out of the water. He had a good year, but he's very hit or miss right now. But if they get another pitcher in there, they could be dangerous.
Okay. So, for the record, Ed, who you got winning this division? Atlanta?
I've got Atlanta winning the division, followed closely by Philadelphia, who I think is going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
Wow.
And then
I got
Weinberg?
I have the Mets coming out of this division and Atlanta number 2. I don't know if Atlanta's pitching staff will hold them throughout the year. If it does, that might. But, I mean, their hitters, if they hit like last year, they're going to be dangerous. But I don't see their pitching staff doing as well as they did last year. But we'll see.
I'm going to do the noob move, and I'm going to roll with Philly. All the speculation, all the hype, man, I'm feeding into it. Cheese steaks, baby.
Just like
Let's
Ron
go Phillies.
and the Lakers, huh?
Yeah, dude, that's going to be another podcast. Fucking LeBron James, man.
Hey, I don't blame you. Yeah,
Should have came to Philly.
Philly looks tough, man. I mean, they do look good. I just think that Atlanta's a team that's had more time to come together. And a lot of times you see these guys that come and make a splash like Giancarlo, don't call me Mike Stanton from the Yankees. I mean, he came over and didn't quite do what everybody thought he was going to do. Obviously still hit 38 home runs over there last year, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of times those splash signings don't pay off right away, and I think that might be the case there. if you don't mind, Bryce, before we jump out of this division, I'd like to ask either Matt or you an interesting question about the Marlins.
Yeah.
And what everybody's boy Derek Jeter is doing with that franchise down there, man. Since he got there, they seem to be one Jose Fernandez boat ride away from being a playoff